No, no. The second question was, actually, this question has been submitted by one of the greatest alimidin. Uh, he is one of my closest friends. His name is Muhammad Asrat Al Jamali. He
Hmm.
is a young and one of the among the great dais. He has submitted the question that many religions claim that their
Yeah.
God is the true creator. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was the
I know that one.
question.
I was asking the previous question. Do you think it's the for the previous question I've given a sufficient answer? So I'll move to
Yeah,
this one.
the previous question was if Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is, he's a Ghafur Rahim, is
Right, right.
he uses for Al Wadud, he's
Hmm.
all forgiving, most merciful. Why does not Allah Subhanahu wa Taala forgive those who die as non-believers?
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I gave an answer. So die as non-believers again. It's conditional. There are many things into place. Not as
Yeah,
simple as it's a disbeliever, so it's going to hell. So it's not as simple as that. So yeah, we're done with that. The next question is a very interesting and important question, which you've mentioned.
yeah,
That
yeah.
many people claim that it is our God. How can we say that it is Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? So there are two ways you can do
So
that. Okay.
I think this is one of the most important question.
Sure. 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 We'll cover this one. Okay. So this is very interesting. Uh, I made some notes related to this question so that I can give a better answer. Let me just find them. Yeah, good. So the question was: many religions claim that their God is the true creator. How can we know that only Allah is the true creator and that all other claim gods are false? Good. So I actually did a video on this with brother Petrit Kola. We had a series, and one video we covered. The first part of that series was this: why only Allah? If God exists, why only Allah? So this might be a bit more philosophical. So there are two ways you can establish that. If you can show Islam is true, of course, then Allah is true. That is one. That is very simple. We can do that. But now, if we had to take the other route, how would we do that? Just making a case for God's existence. How can you go to making a case that okay, it's the Islamic concept of God, not some other concept of God? This is very interesting. Very when you see the arguments for God's existence that we have, many of them that I was going to bring up in my slide. Actually, if you keep all of those arguments together, which is very important, let's start with
Yeah,
the contingency argument. Okay,
yeah,
the contingency argument, what conclusion does it give you? So there is no argument in the world for God's existence that can give you a full description of God. Every argument for God's existence rather sometimes makes you reach one attribute of God. So you need multiple arguments to understand the concept of God. So when it comes to the contingency argument, you understand, okay, there has to be a necessary being. What does that tell us? That being has to be eternal, without beginning, right, without end. That being has to be unlimited. The contingency argument within the second stage, the more we understand, the necessary being cannot have any limitations as such. Those contingent limitations, you cannot say that the necessary being is like limited reality in that sense. So the necessary being would not have those limitations. So just by the fact that if you have established God's existence, you have established an eternal God and an unlimited God. The contingency argument does point out to the attributes of God being eternal and unlimited. So when we are talking about unlimited, if God has power, God has unlimited power. If God has knowledge, the knowledge is unlimited. What does that tell you? So the fact that the limited, so we one by one with every argument we will refute different kind of false concept of God. So if with this argument you have established that limited finite understandings of God have gone out of the picture. Like if you are on the table, let's make it a thought experiment. Okay, and we have different concepts of God, false concept of God, then we have the true concept of God. Those finite limited concepts of God being the ultimate reality fail. You throw, keep them aside. They don't work because the contingency argument is clearly giving you an eternal being who is unlimited. So you can also sometimes derive that being, or that being having attributes that are unlimited, like attributes having potential which is not limited in any way. That's one. Let's move on to the Kalam cosmological argument. If the Kalam cosmological argument works, because there are different debates around this subject, but let's say that the Kalam cosmological argument works, which is that everything begins to exist as a cause. The universe began to exist, so the universe has a cause. Now, if the universe began to exist, it is a creation of God in that sense. If it is a creation of God, then pantheistic understanding of God is gone. Pantheism, the Kalam cosmological argument, if it is true, then it refutes pantheism. So there are what pantheism basically is that people think that okay, the universe is God and the God is the universe. No, but then if there is an external entity to the universe which created the universe, even to some extent the contingency argument might allude to this, but the Kalam cosmological argument makes it more significant. If the universe began to exist, and there is an external entity, a first cause that created the universe, then the pantheistic understanding is to some extent gone, because there is actually, this is creation, this is not God. This universe, whatever is there, like this me, is not God, is a creation of God. So the pantheistic understanding of God is gone. Now let's go back to what we derive. If God is all powerful, if you keep these two arguments, the Kalam cosmological argument and the contingency argument, you understand God to be omnipotent and omniscient. Okay, if God is omnipotent meaning all powerful, omniscient being all knowledgeable. If God is all powerful and all knowledgeable, many philosophers explain how, if you have these attributes, then polytheism is gone. How is polytheism gone? Is because, first of all, these arguments, they fit with monotheism better, but at the same time, any polytheistic understanding of God, multiple gods having omniscience and omnipotence, creates contradictions. How? I'll explain. If you said there are two creators and both are omnipotent, the fact that having an ability of omnipotent is having full power. But if you have two full power, they both are limited, because if he's full power, there is God A and God B, they both are fully powerful, they both limit each other. So there is no one is omnipotent in that sense. So what were you saying that they are omnipotent? And if let's say this one has more power over this one, okay, so how is this omnipotent? This is not omnipotent then. Only this is omnipotent. But let's say this one has more power over this one, then this is omnipotent, this is not omnipotent, because he has more power and he cannot be all powerful, only he can be all powerful. But let's say if we both draw, then both are not omnipotent, because an omnipotent being would not draw with anyone else. So if you have an omnipotent being, polytheism is not making sense here. But at the same time, omniscience, having all knowledge, it's very interesting thought experiment. Let's say that you have two gods, A and B. If God A, okay, wants to keep a secret from God B, okay, can he do that? If he can do that, then God B is not omniscient, because he does not have all knowledge. But if he can do that, like if he can't do that and he will have, then in that sense he is not omnipotent, because he cannot do one thing, which is keep a secret. You get what I'm saying? Are you following so far?
Yeah, I'm following.
Yeah, so polytheism is not making sense. But the more you move into another argument, okay, another argument is argument from order, like the laws of nature, how they form consistently. This actually shows that there is only one will manifesting. Even if you're saying that there are 10 different astaghfirullah gods, the manifestation within the universe is only one will. So you have the burden to explain why only one will is being manifested and there are more gods. And as I told you, that within omnipotence and omniscience, they create contradictions if you try to give a polytheistic understanding. So it makes sense that there is only one God. So what we have established with these three arguments, the argument from order, our contingency argument, and Kalam cosmological argument, that the pantheistic and polytheistic understanding of God is gone out of the picture. We only have now other concepts of God that are left. Now I will add one more argument, which is argument from reason.
Yeah.
Argument from reason is an argument that shows how the fact that we have intelligence is because an intelligent being designed us to have intelligence. That gives us confidence that okay, we actually have intelligence. Now within philosophy, it's very much established that if you believe in an impersonal God as in just like an abstract force, not a being, as like not a personal being, then you cannot make sense of your reliability of your reasoning. So the argument from reason is making a case for a personal intelligent God. The God has to be intelligent. If the God is not intelligent, then you cannot make sense of your reasoning. So if you want to make sense of human intelligence reasoning, that will give you one attribute of God, which is intelligence. that the God has to be intelligent. So the impersonal idea of God is gone out of the picture. So the impersonal idea of God is gone. Now argument from consciousness. Okay, now the fifth argument from consciousness. If we are conscious, then there has to be some exponentially greater thing like consciousness, which is responsible or the source of our consciousness. That gives you that the God that we have, like for example, the attribute of God, we get another, which is that the God has to be conscious. It cannot be an impersonal God, an impersonal force. So what have we refuted so far? Pantheistic impersonal understanding of God, polytheistic understanding of God, and non-conscious understanding of God is gone out of the picture. Now if we have removed all of this, pantheism and polytheism is gone, what do we have left? We only have left monotheistic traditions generally. When you have the monotheistic traditions left, and you have one more, which is deism. Deism is one more form of God. Yes. Let me give me inshallah, I'll try to cover this because you said it's important. I'm trying to cover this in depth. Okay. So now what we have left is deism. Deism is basically a belief in God, that God created everything but is not interested. He's not interested. This is refuted by the moral argument and human nature and human spirituality. Why?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the moral argument, there are two types: the moral knowledge argument, which is epistemological, and the moral ontological argument, which is the best grounding for moral reality. Both actually show how, first of all, how do we have this moral nature, and how do we know, how do we have this, how do we know what are moral facts or not, and how can we ground morality? Ultimately goes back to God. So if there is a God, that is, if you go back to the moral argument, it actually shows that there is a loving, caring God in that sense. If that God is loving and caring, and then if you look at, for instance, human nature, God created us on this natural disposition to seek Him, to worship Him, to connect with Him, to connect with something transcendent beyond material reality. In fact, there are some psychological studies that show atheist or theist, when we are in great trouble, we naturally make prayer. God, please help me. Even atheists, when a plane is about to crash, they feel like, oh yeah, God, please save me. He's not believing in God, but there is something within our fitra that ignites. I've spoken to the leading cognitive scientists in the world, and they say that yes, this is true. So why did God create us on this natural disposition? Because He wants direct connection with us. It shows that there is some, He created us on this need to connect with God directly. So if there is a loving and caring God who created us on this need of connecting with Him directly, or we have human spirituality, we want to connect to something transcendent in that sense, which is God. That is what fulfills us. That is what gives us meaning and purpose. Then this God created us and gave us the ultimate satisfaction in worshiping Him, in connecting with Him, in that sense. So definitely that God is a caring God, and He cares about us, and He wants to guide us, and He wants He's concerned about humankind. He's concerned about human prayer. You can see, because of the moral argument, along with you understanding human nature, human spirituality, you see that the deistic understanding of God cannot make sense of human nature, understanding human nature, the moral realities that you ascribe, that if God is ultimately all loving in that sense, then you cannot make sense that He created humankind on this disposition. The only solution is that this God is a loving, caring God that is involved with the growth of human beings. And this is where there's one more thing which is very important. We strive for moral excellence, but again, apart from revelation, which is revelation is revelation from God, like a guidance from God, direct guidance from God, we go astray. So we are in this need for revelation from God. If God created us on this natural disposition to be in need for revelation of God, then deism is out of the picture.